Welcome to Snyder's Inc., where the fun never ends. Reactions, gaming, and more with Josh as your friend. Tune in, buckle up, it's a ride you don't wanna miss. Snyder's Inc., let's dive in, feel the ultimate bliss.
Hello everybody, welcome to Snyder's Inc. I just realized my mic's still a bit away from me. Today we have got Savvox video 5 of the most disturbing unsolved cases. We go get right into it, ladies and gentlemen. The like button, subscribe button, comment, stick down below. If you'd like to become a member of the channel, link is in the description. Let's go.
In May 2011, Jim Pitson walked his 6-year-old son Timothy to class at Greenman Elementary School in Aurora, Illinois. "I told him I loved him and to be good," Jim would later recall. The last words exchanged between him and his son that day. Little did anyone know that this simple farewell would open a door to one of the most unsettling mysteries in recent memory. By that same afternoon, Timothy and his mother, Amy Fry Pitson, had vanished.
Oh, I know this one. I know this story. That's why Savvox invited you. Usually gives an intro on what he's doing. I guess he just decided not to do that in this case. But yeah, I know this story.
Never to be seen again. Within an hour of drop-off, Amy checked Timothy out of school, explaining there was a, quote, family emergency. Cameras later showed her and Timothy at a Chicago area repair shop, and then at the Brookfield Zoo. They spent that night at a Wisconsin water park resort called Key Lime Cove. On May 12th, they drove north into Wisconsin Dells and checked into the Kalahari Resort. Surveillance footage at the resort captured the pair in the lobby the next morning, with Timothy wearing the same Spider-Man backpack he'd taken to school, and that was the last time any video would show him alive. Investigators say that this is where the trail turned cold. That afternoon, Amy began calling relatives from her cell phone. Between noon and 1:30 p.m. on May 13th, she phoned family members saying that she and Timothy were safe and not in any danger. In one of the calls, Timothy can be heard faintly in the background, quietly asking if he could have something to eat. She spoke confidently, insisting that everything was fine. However, to her husband Jim's frantic inquiries, she offered absolutely nothing, instead choosing to ignore his messages while telling other relatives that they were safe and saying that, quote, Timothy belongs to me. Timothy and I will be fine. In one eerie moment captured by police reports, Amy told her brother, quote, I'm not going to hurt Timothy, even as the family struggled to understand what was happening. As night fell on May 13th, Amy was spotted alone. Security cameras caught her at a Family Dollar store and a grocery store in Winnebago, Illinois, buying only envelopes, notepaper, and a pen. Just after 11 p.m., she checked into the Rockford Inn in Rockford, Illinois, without her son. The next morning, a hotel maid discovered Amy's body in the motel room. She had taken her own life by cutting her wrists and overdosing on medication. In the corner of the room was a suicide note, the only clue left to explain the terrifying mystery. The contents of the note are chilling. Amy apologized for the, quote, mess she'd made, but said nothing could have changed her mind. I've taken him somewhere safe, she wrote. He will be cared for, and he says that he loves you. Please know that there is nothing you could have said or done that would have changed my mind. The note closed with this haunting promise. You will never find him. Those final lines.
Okay, so you killed him. You killed him. He's dead. You just say you killed him. You killed him, he's dead, he ain't ever coming back. Cause, like, that's what happened.
Now form the eerie refrain of this case, as if written to instill fear that this boy would disappear forever without a trace. Police swept the motel room and Amy's vehicle for evidence.
The reason I also know that is because this kid is old enough to know he has a dad. This kid was old enough to know he had a mother. This kid's old enough to know he's in school. He's old enough to know where he is, like who he is. Hold on. I'm gonna go back a bit. I'm just gonna see if he brings up how old the kid is.
2011, Jim Pitson walked his 6-year-old son
So 6 years old at this point. Okay, 6 years old. He's 6 years old in 2011, which would make him how old? What, his 20s now? 21, I think? Something like that? 2021? So if he wanted to find his dad, he would. If he was alive. I think it's safe to say he's not alive. It's just fortunate that they might never find his body because they don't know where the heck she took him.
Bore only Amy's blood, and no sign that Timothy had been harmed. They then discovered a disturbing detail. The family Jeep showed a stain later identified as Timothy's blood. At first, investigators were alarmed, but family members explained it likely came from a nosebleed that Timothy had suffered in the car days before. The one major mystery item was Amy's cell phone. It had gone missing. It was finally found 2 years later beside a rural highway in northern Illinois, but it yielded no new leads. Investigators searched rivers, woods, and remote areas, but never found a trace of Timothy himself. Timothy's father, Jim, his mother's relatives, and the police struggled to make sense of the scene. Was Timothy with someone who would care for him, as Amy's note claimed, or was he the victim of a crime? The words in the note say
The second one. It's the second one. He was a victim of a murder from his mom, and then his mom took her own life to not get caught.
that he was safe, and that he was being taken to someone who would love and care for him, and that he would never be found. Offered no factual leads, only dread. Detectives combed local neighborhoods and highways, but nothing turned up. Timothy simply ceased to be in sight. All that remained was the vacant promise of a child supposed to be somewhere, quote, safe. Over the years, friends and family have clung to any hope they can. His grandmother and others have speculated that Amy may have given him to people in a secluded community, perhaps a religious commune. They point out that Amy had converted to a strict Mormon sect and wonder if she had entrusted Timothy to like-minded people who would raise him outside modern reach. Timothy's paternal grandmother even said, if you read that note and you know her, I would guess she probably gave him to somebody to live in a compound. In the meantime, the official case has never been closed. The FBI and Aurora, Illinois police keep Timothy on their missing persons lists. Investigators say hundreds of leads have been exhausted, including false sightings and tips from across the country, and none have led to Timothy. For a time, news of age progress portraits and natural media exposure kept the mystery alive, but no breakthrough came. In 2019, a 23-year-old Ohio man walked into a Kentucky home and claimed to be Timothy, saying that he had escaped from captors after 7 years.
Why would you... Why? Why? You're 23 years old? That wouldn't even add up?
He's mobilized immediately, but DNA tests proved the claim was a hoax.
Yeah.
As an FBI spokesman put it, hopes were dashed, and the family's day of false hope confirmed that the case was still unsolved. Today,
That's just... You should be arrested if you do that. I think if you pretend to be a missing person, you should be arrested.
more than a decade after that ordinary morning, the disappearance remains an open mystery. Law enforcement says it does not and will not forget Timothy, promising to keep looking for answers. The young boy's name continues to appear on missing posters and online databases, but there are no new developments to report. The eerie silence around Timothy's fate is the only answer we have. A child who slipped from view under the most unsettling circumstances, leaving only questions behind. On the night of February 13th, 2000, a fierce storm rolled in over the foothills of North Carolina. In the early hours of Valentine's Day, 9-year-old Asha Jaquila Degree quietly slipped out of her family's house. She was dressed for school and carried her pink and yellow backpack, and she began walking along Highway 18 around 2:30 a.m. Less than 2 hours later, at roughly 4 a.m., a passing truck driver spotted Asha walking beside the road about a mile from her home. By the time he turned around to offer help, the girl had vanished into the dense woods. By dawn, Asha's parents awoke to a nightmare.
This is one of the most... This story I've also heard. I probably have heard of all of these, but this is another one that's insane. Because this one's a child that disappears on their own accord, and no one knows where they went. Like, no, where did this child disappear to? And why did they leave the house to begin with at, like, early dawn in the, like, middle of the night?
Harold and Akila Degree discovered that their daughter's bedroom was empty, and her backpack was missing from its usual place. The house was eerily still, and nothing appeared disturbed. They immediately called 911. As sunlight broke on the rural horizon, Sheriff's deputies, canine teams, and neighbors were already combing the muddy roads and tangled woods where Asha was last seen. Searchers shouted her name and laid flares along the highway, but there was no sign of Asha in the storm-battered fields. Days turned into weeks with no trace of Asha. There was no ransom calls or demands, and no one had seen her. Police interviewed neighbors, questioned school friends, and followed every tip, but each lead ran cold. Investigators brought search dogs and helicopters into the hunt, combing the ridges and hollows, but still nothing turned up. For nearly a year, the case went cold, as if Asha had walked into thin air. Then, in October 2001, construction workers digging a trench along Highway 18 in Burke County found something chilling. They unearthed a large plastic bundle beside the road, later identified as Asha's pink and yellow school book bag, still full of her belongings. The backpack was more than 30 miles from Shelby, wrapped in 2 sealed black garbage bags and buried in mud. Among her notebooks and clothes were also a New Kids on the Block concert t-shirt and a library book that Asha had never checked out. Those items suggested that someone else had handled her bag before it was left on the highway. The backpack's discovery reignited the investigation. Agents sent its contents to the FBI lab and renewed the search for answers. By 2015, FBI Charlotte was offering a $25,000 reward for information, and authorities released age-progressed images of what Asha might look like as an adult. Detectives retraced her steps, examined old tips, and kept the case in the public eye. In 2016, police announced a breakthrough lead: a surveillance photo of a dark green 1970s-era car that had been seen in Shelby on the night of February 14. Investigators theorized that Asha might have climbed into a car like that one on the highway. It was a chilling possibility, but the car was never located, and no suspect was identified. Throughout the search, Asha's parents never gave up hope. Her mother later said, quote, "We still have hope. We don't think she's dead, but we still need help." In September 2024, law enforcement executed search warrants on several properties connected to a Shelby family. The unsealed court documents revealed disturbing new details. Investigators reported that they now believed Asha had agreed to be a victim of homicide, with her body concealed. They said DNA taken from items in Asha's backpack matched 2 family members of that family, a teenage girl and an adult man. One of the locations searched belonged to a man named Roy Deadman, and police found an old green car on his property that closely matched the vehicle of interest. Another search targeted the Northbrook Rest Home in Vale, an assisted living facility owned by the same family. No human remains were found at any of the sites. Even with these dramatic developments, the investigation is still open, and Asha's disappearance has not been solved. Now, more than 25 years later, Asha Degree remains missing. Her disappearance on that rainy Valentine's morning continues to haunt Shelby. Each anniversary, her parents and community members walk the road from the house to the spot where she was last seen. Under the sign bearing her picture, a billboard on the side of the road still displays her photo and a plea for information. Authorities and volunteers have combed every possible lead over the years, but so far, all clues only deepen the mystery. On that empty rural road, Asha's footsteps ended. Late on Friday, February 24, 1978, 5 young men from Yuba and Sutter counties climbed into Jack Madruga's pale green 1969 Mercury Montego and drove north to Chico. 30-year-old Jack Madruga, 29-year-old William Sterling, 32-year-old Ted Wire, 24-year-old Jack Hewitt, and
I don't know if I've heard this one or not. These look this guy looks familiar. I just don't remember if I've heard these names or not.
25-year-old Gary Mathias shared a deep enthusiasm for basketball, despite the intellectual disabilities that limited 4 of them and the schizophrenia that Mathias managed with medication. They planned to cheer for the Chico State Wildcats, grab some snacks, then head home to rest before their own Special Olympics tournament the next morning. They never made it back. Sometime after 10 p.m., the Montego rolled south out of Chico, but instead of staying on Highway 99 toward Marysville, it turned east into the Sierra foothills. Shortly after midnight, the car took a lonely mountain road that snaked up toward the Plumas National Forest. There were no streetlights, only snow billowing across the windshield. Around 4,400 feet, the Montego ground to a stop in a shallow drift. Its rear wheels spun, digging ruts that proved useless. Whoever killed the engine left a window rolled down and the doors unlocked, something Madruga's family swore he would never do. The keys were gone, but when deputies later hotwired the car, it started on the first crank and had a quarter tank of fuel. Its undercarriage was pristine, not even the muffler bore a scrape, as if the driver knew every bend of that rugged road. A winter storm buried the region that weekend. 3 days later, a forest ranger, remembering a bulletin about the missing men, led deputies to the abandoned Montego. Inside lay programs from the basketball game, candy wrappers, and a neatly folded California road map, small artifacts of an ordinary night interrupted. Nothing indicated why the group had veered 70 miles off course, nor why 5 healthy men had not simply pushed their car free of the drift. Search parties assembled, battling blizzards so fierce that rescue crews themselves became disoriented and had to be pulled out by snowcat, and for weeks the forest gave up.
Well, as for why they didn't push it out, I mean, there's 5 men with disabilities and now. I'm not saying they couldn't have, I just mean the thought might have not come into their head due to that. One of them's dealing with freaking schizophrenia, I think I heard, so yeah, it might be just a case of the brain wasn't thinking that way.
Of no trace. Then investigators heard an unsettling story. On the same night the Montego stopped, a Sacramento man named Joseph Shons had suffered a mild heart attack further up the road. As he lay in his Volkswagen, he saw headlights behind him and silhouettes moving around a second car. One figure looked like a woman holding a baby. When he called for help, the lights snapped off and the figures melted into the dark. Hours later, flashlight beams played across the trees near his car, again falling silent when he shouted. Shons eventually staggered 8 miles to safety, passing the Montego on his way down. His account suggested someone, maybe the 5 men, maybe not, had been very near that spot in the small hours after midnight. Spring came and the snow disappeared. On June 4th, a group of motorcyclists broke into a Forest Service trailer 19 miles up the mountain to escape the lingering chill. A sour odor greeted them. Inside, sprawled on a cot, lay what was left of Ted Wire, wrapped in 8 Army-issue sheets tucked so tightly that officers later wondered who else had been there to cocoon him like that. Wire had starved and frozen after losing nearly half his body weight. Frostbite had turned his feet black. His beard suggested he lived up to 13 weeks after the disappearance. On a side table sat his wallet, a nickel ring engraved Ted, a watch no one recognized, and a partially melted candle. Despite ample matches and paperback novels, no fire had been lit. Outside, a shed stood open. Someone had pried it apart and consumed a dozen sea ration cans, yet a storeroom packed with dehydrated meals, enough to feed all 5 men for a year, remained untouched. A butane tank that could have powered the trailer's heater was still closed. It was as though survival lay within arm's reach, but reason had slipped away in the dark. Wire had not died alone. Gary Mathias' well-worn sneakers sat neatly beside the bunk. Investigators guessed his frost-swollen feet forced him to borrow Wire's leather shoes for a trek that ended somewhere in the forest. Jack Hewitt's denim-clad backbone turned up 2 miles northwest of the trailer, beneath a manzanita bush. His skull was found downhill the next day. Closer to the Montego, 11 miles from the car, searchers discovered Bill Sterling's scattered bones and Jack Madruga's partially consumed body on opposite sides of the road. All 3 men had succumbed to hypothermia. Only Gary Mathias, diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic, deprived of the antipsychotic medication left in the Montego, was never found. Investigators pieced together a grim timeline. They believe the 5 left the car soon after it bogged down, trudging uphill through gale-blown snow in street clothes. Somewhere along the road, 2 turned aside, Sterling and Madruga collapsing in the drifts. Hewitt may have pressed on, but faltered before reaching shelter. Wire and at least one companion smashed the trailer window and settled among stock cupboards and fuel they either did not notice or could not use. What drove them up the mountain in the first place remained inexplicable. Families insisted none of the men enjoyed the cold or wilderness, and all had commitments the next morning. Mathias, an army veteran familiar with the area, might have persuaded them, yet he too vanished. No footprints survived to tell the story. No fingerprints linked strangers to the car or the trailer, and autopsies yielded only the predictable ravages of exposure and starvation. Rumors multiplied, hitchhikers forcing a detour at gunpoint, drug runs concealed beneath the guise of a ball game.
There is something I want to write here. There's something I want to write. I don't know what it was, but something went awry here. Someone killed them without them knowing, they're planning to, or someone in that group killed the others. But something happened here.
even mountain hermits stalking the road. Detectives chased each lead into silence. Today, the case sits in a locked file cabinet in Yuba County, thick with dead-end tips and aging interview notes. Somewhere in the Sierra, Gary Mathias might lay undiscovered. Or perhaps he walked out to the mountains that spring and slipped into a life of obscurity, haunted by a night that swallowed 4 friends. The Montego, long since scrapped, offered no final clue. Only the frigid silence of that forest road and a shattered trailer window remained to suggest the panic, confusion, or unseen menace that steered 5 ordinary men into an extraordinary mystery, one that has kept its secrets for nearly half a century. On the night of December 30th, 2000, the Miyazawa family, 44-year-old Mikio, 41-year-old Yasuko, and their children, 8-year-old Nina and 6-year-old Rei, were violently killed in their home in Setagaya. At 10:40 a.m. on December 31st, Yasuko's mother discovered the scene. Mikio was found collapsed at the foot of the stairs.
That's insane. So someone just broke into this house and just killed everyone in sight. Like this, that's personal.
Body pierced by multiple stab wounds. Upstairs, Yasuko and Nina lay together, both repeatedly stabbed with a long sashimi kitchen knife. In a nearby bedroom, 6-year-old Rei lay in his bed. He had been strangled to death. The killer brutally murdered an entire family in what became one of Japan's most chilling unsolved crimes. Investigators believe the intruder slipped in through the back of the house. Police deduced that he likely climbed the fence and an air conditioning unit to reach a second-floor bathroom window, cutting away the screen to crawl inside. Muddy footprints found below the window corroborated this theory. It appears that Mikio unexpectedly encountered the intruder. According to reports, Mikio rushed up the stairs towards the disturbance, only to be fatally stabbed in the head with the sashimi knife. Incredibly, the blade broke off inside his skull. The killer then used the broken knife to mercilessly stab Yasuko and Nina. Finally, he retrieved a Santoku chef's knife from the kitchen and used it to finish the 2 victims. By the time the officers arrived, the 4 bodies, father, mother, daughter, and son, lay lifeless on the floor, each brutally slaughtered. But the killer's rampage did not end there. Instead of fleeing immediately, he remained in the house for hours after the murders. He treated the home as if it were his own. He took food from the family.
He was there for hours? That's insane. That's insane. Being there for hours after is insane.
Family's refrigerator, eating a ripe melon and 4 ice cream bars, and drinking 4 bottles of barley tea. As the bodies rotted nearby, he used the bathroom, leaving his waste unflushed. He even sat at the family computer and apparently connected it to the internet at around 1:20 a.m. that night. When Yasuko's mother returned at 10 a.m., she accidentally awakened the computer while searching for clues. Some reports even say the killer sat or napped on the living room sofa. Every drawer in the house was rifled through and tossed about, and some contents were dumped into the bathtub and toilet. He stole a small amount of money, but oddly left most cash untouched. When he finally left, he left behind a gruesome trail of evidence: the broken sashimi knife, a hip bag, clothing, a scarf, hat.
Yet left a bunch of stuff and it's still unsolved. That's crazy.
Gloves, and several handkerchiefs were all scattered on the living room floor. In the hours and days that followed, detectives worked the scene methodically. Everywhere they looked, they found the killer's traces. Bloodstains of type A blood, not belonging to the Miyazawas, were collected. Tens of thousands of fingerprints were dusted, and over 100 DNA samples were catalogued. In fact, police now believe they knew almost everything about the murderer. He had bled in the house. He carried a hip bag full of foreign sand. He removed his shirt at the scene, then put on a new one, but they still did not know his name. The investigators canvassed the entire neighborhood in an extraordinary Operation Roller. Hundreds of officers, even riot police, went door to door collecting fingerprints and interviewing local residents. They traced the killer's shirt to a limited run of only 130 ever made, and managed to interview the dozen people who bought that model. Forensic scientists analyzed the killer's hip bag. It contained sand from the Nevada desert, near Edwards Air Force Base, and sand from a skate park in Japan. His shoes were identified as a South Korean-made pair sold by a British company. Every scrap of evidence seemed like a clue, but none would point to a culprit. The genetic clues were particularly haunting. The blood sample taken from the scene was analyzed to produce a DNA profile. It revealed the suspect was a man of mixed background. His father's DNA was of East Asian origin, while his mother's DNA traced to Southern Europe. Japanese police reached out to Interpol, fearing that the killer might be a foreigner or someone not registered in Japan. Detectives built a composite sketch from the DNA data, hoping a passing resident might recall a similar face, but it yielded no breakthrough. By the end of the investigation, Japanese authorities had amassed one of the largest case files in their history. Over 246,000 police work hours had been devoted to the Setagaya case. More than 12,000 pieces of physical evidence, exhibits, swabs, photographs were preserved. Yet the investigation hit a wall. None of the DNA or fingerprints matched anyone in the criminal database. The suspect had no criminal record as far as police could tell. Physically, they estimated him to be around 5 foot 5 inches tall, slim, and likely right-handed. His age was later revised down to the late teens or early 20s at the time of the crime, but those general traits fit thousands of men. It was as if the killer had simply evaporated.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. For a guy to leave so much evidence and yet somehow not get caught, that's insane.
Decades have passed, but the Setagaya murders remain unsolved. The Tokyo police still assign a small team of detectives to the cold case, and a 20 million yen reward is still offered for information leading to an arrest. In 2019, authorities quietly announced that they would demolish the Miyazawa home, now a rotten shell, though they assured everyone that all forensic evidence had already been secured elsewhere. The family's relatives and neighbors resisted, appealing to keep the site intact as a memorial. In any case, the empty lot would carry none of the answers. The old police chief who led the initial hunt, Takeshi Tsuchida, says he has never been able to let go of the case. Even in retirement, he visits the neighborhood and quietly hands out flyers with case details, pleading for tips. The bereaved grandparents built a shrine with photos of the dead and still pray each night for justice, though they admit they may never see it. In the end, as the investigators will tell you, the Setagaya family murders closed without answers. Every fact is chilling. Every clue is haunting. 4 innocent lives were taken in a house that was never meant to be a crime scene. And to this day, the person who did it remains nobody to us. A ghost who slipped away after the killing, leaving only blood.
I'm just curious why, because you killed people only once, I guess? He only did this one family, then ran? That's what makes me so confused. Why kill this family for no real reason?
And questions behind. On February 25th, 1957, a young man, checking illegal rabbit traps, came upon a cardboard carton partly hidden in brush alongside Susquehanna Road in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He pried back the flaps and found a naked boy, 4 to 5 years old, laid on a worn-out plaid blanket, arms folded across a bruised torso. Fearful of losing his traps, he left the scene unreported. Days later, a college student chasing a straying rabbit stopped near the same thicket, peered into the box, and hurried to the police. What patrolman encountered was a child with damp hair, cropped short, eyes half closed as though he had only just blinked, and limbs stiffening in the winter air. The discovery launched Philadelphia's most enduring homicide mystery. An autopsy at the city morgue revealed a catalogue of injuries. The boy weighed barely 30 pounds. Bruises mottled his head and body. One heavy blow to the skull had ended his life. Scars on the ankle, groin, and beneath the chin pointed to earlier surgical treatment. Fingernails and toenails had been trimmed with recent care, yet coarse clumps of hair still clung to his shoulders, suggesting someone had sheared him quickly, perhaps after death. Pathologists fixed the time of death at 2 or 3 days before discovery. The cardboard carton that held him once contained a JCPenney bassinet. Investigators traced its serial number to a store in Upper Darby, but receipts vanished in routine record purges. Hope that the child would soon be claimed proved short-lived. Detectives photographed the face, dressed the body in a borrowed suit, and posed him seated to create a lifelike image for flyers. 400,000 copies traveled with every gas bill in the region. Fingerprints taken at the morgue matched no hospital or adoption files. Taxi stands, bus depots, and orphanages were canvassed without success. By April, the investigation had sifted through more than 1,000 leads and stood stalled by the cruelty of anonymity. The city interred the boy in a potter's field, marking the grave with a plain slab that read, "Heavenly Father, bless this unknown child." Even so, the case refused burial. Journalists christened the victim The Boy in the Box, then America's Unknown Child, and the file grew thick with private theories. A runaway from a nearby foster home, an unwanted twin passed hand to hand, a victim of traveling carnies. In 1960, a psychic led detectives to an empty warehouse, claiming the murderer had once lived there. Nothing emerged except dust and doubt. Through the 1970s and 1980s, cold case squads reopened evidence lockers, retested fibers, and compared dental patterns against missing persons reports as far as Ontario. Each cycle ended where the first one had, in the void between a small corpse and larger questions. Technology eventually pried open the grave. In 1998, the remains were exhumed to recover a tooth for mitochondrial DNA, which entered national databases without producing a kinship hit. A second exhumation in 2019 saw nuclear DNA from bone fragments. Outside laboratories extracted a profile robust enough for forensic genealogy. In late November 2022, they isolated a parental couple from West Philadelphia whose infant, born on January 1953, had vanished from public records. The profile matched. After 65 years, the boy received a name, Joseph Augustus Zarelli. Police announced the identification on December 8, 2022, yet emphasized the homicide itself remained unsolved. Revelations spawned fresh unease. Joseph's mother, Mary Elizabeth Plunkett, and father, Augustus John Zarelli, had both died, leaving fragments of family lore but no clear account of how a 4-year-old slipped from their custody. Siblings, still living, were
We don't know if they slipped from their custody. He may have just gone and killed them.
notified and shielded from public view. Detectives explored possibilities that Joseph had been placed informally with another household or institution where maltreatment turned fatal. Files from the mid-1950s social services agencies proved threadbare at best. Many records had been purged or misfiled decades earlier. The path from a West Philadelphia birth certificate to a battered body in Fox Chase lay strewn with paperwork gaps and fading memories, frustrating any linear reconstruction of his final months. Commemorations unfolded in parallel with renewed investigation. On what would have been Joseph's 70th birthday, January 13, 2023, Ivy Hill Cemetery unveiled a granite marker bearing his full name, set beside the original Unknown Child headstone that decades of visitors had adorned with teddy bears and matchbox cars. Retired and active officers assembled quietly, aware that the stone closed only one layer of mystery. Photographs of the grave circulated online, fueling public interest and, police hoped, prodding someone to unburden a secret kept since the Eisenhower years. Throughout 2024 and into 2025, homicide detectives combed archival property records and parish baptism logs, tracking any address associated with the Zarelli or Plunkett surnames in the mid-1950s. Ground-penetrating radar sweeps examined backyards in southwest Philadelphia, where the family once lived. None of the searches yielded material evidence. Investigators also re-evaluated the blankets that had cocooned Joseph, spectroscope to hunt for manufacturing markers that might place it in a specific household, though results, if any, remained undisclosed. Public appeals raised the standing reward to $20,000, yet no witness emerged to speak of a child beaten, starved, or suddenly absent. Nearly 70 years after a cold gust rattled an abandoned carton in the weeds of Susquehanna Road, the account still halted at its most important juncture: the hands that originally delivered Joseph Augustus Zarelli into that box. His identity now stood clear, while the identity of whoever ended his life was still a mystery. Patrol cars rolling down that suburban lane in the small hours of winter 1957 would have passed within yards of a crime concealed only by a scuffed cardboard wall. Until the source of that violence comes to light, the boy in the box will remain a chilling presence, defined not by who he was, but by the moment someone chose to discard him in silence.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is it for this reaction video. Let me know what you think in the comments, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. If you'd like to become a member, hold on. Hit the like button, hit subscribe button, comment your thing down below. If you'd like to become a member, link is in the description. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you all for the next one.